As David said, I am a Metro board member appointed by Anise Parker, City of Houston representative. The warning I give at the beginning of this talk is the great benefit I have for a board member is I get to speak for myself. I am 1 vote out of 9, so you will hear some opinions here that may be my opinion rather than official Metro policy. Okay, when we talk about transit, we tend to talk about light rail, and commuter rail, and BRT, and ferry boats, and we talk about almost everything except this, which is the local bus system, which is the backbone of what we do. It is the largest ridership at Metro. It is the largest expense year in, year out. Wherever you go in the country, local buses like this are doing amazing work getting people about their day. But I would also argue that wherever you go in the country, you will see that nobody, from a planning standpoint, from a transit standpoint, is paying that much attention to. That's Magnolia Transit Center, end of the light rail line on the east end. So, as David talked about, what Metro's doing is really rethinking our entire local bus system. So I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about what we're trying to fix. I want to talk about what we're doing to fix it. And I want to talk about how you can help make all of this happen. So what is reimagining? The first really important thing to know here, especially in this room, I mean, this is a room where 2030 seems like tomorrow, where we are always talking about big projects on very long timelines. This is a short-term plan. The goal is to have these routes running down the street, a totally new network in place by next June. Secondly, this is not about spending more money. All of the maps I will show you are for a system that costs the same amount of money to operate as the local bus system we operate today more effectively. And finally, what I'm showing you today is a draft. And we know that by the time this plan is adopted by the Metro Board this fall, it will have changed. And the reason it will have changed is people who live in a neighborhood, people who work in that neighborhood, people who do business in that neighborhood know a lot more than a planner sitting at 1900 Main about that neighborhood. We are going to get some very good ideas in this process, and we want to incorporate those ideas in this plan. Timeline-wise, we selected our consultant, who is actually sitting in the audience, Jeff Carlton, who I may pull up when it comes to Q&A, who has been leading that plan. We selected our consultants back in 2012. Jared Walker, who writes the blog Human Transit, and probably the best book I've ever read on transit, also titled Human Transit, is on the consultant team as well. Started this in 2012. We started by really pulling together existing conditions information. If you're a real wonk, go on the Transit Reimagining website and you will find a document which includes a page of analysis of every Metro local bus route, including comments as to what works and doesn't work, and a full set of every boarding. We know where everybody gets on this system, and this is really the first time Metro has used that data to really rethink the entire system. This is a very data-driven process. And then we moved into defining goals, which is a very important step, actually saying what is the purpose of our system and what are we trying to do. Moved into the draft plan. We are now in about 3 months of public outreach, really running through July. We have public meetings all over the region going on right now. Then we'll revise and finalize the plan, and then the planners at Metro will have a lot of work to do to actually figure out exactly when every bus is where and where every bus driver has to show up, and then implement it next June. Stakeholders have been a huge part of this, and I see multiple of you in the audience here who are in the room here. We've been having stakeholder meetings since the beginning, really bringing together people who represent the communities we serve and all the different kinds of destinations we serve: hospitals, educational institutions, social service, our member jurisdictions, to really make this a collaborative plan. Why are we doing this? The first, most fundamental reason is we have heard from our riders that we could do a lot better here. The community has told us we want a better local bus system. So what does that mean? I would argue, and this is from personal experience because I'm a frequent local bus rider, just got on 53 to get here today, that our system is difficult to learn, it is difficult to understand, and it is difficult to make connections. Let me show you some examples of what we're talking about. This is the Route 40. On this end, it has two branches. Through here, it has, and notice the two branches actually cross each other. Here, it has an express segment. So if you think you're getting on a Route 40 to go right here, if you accidentally get on the express segment, it'll just speed right by where you're trying to go. And then at the south end, it has three different loops which actually utilize the same set of streets. I have not yet found anybody who can explain to me how this functions. I can guarantee you cannot figure it out from the Metro schedule, how that actually operates. The bus drivers know where they're going, but other than that, I have no idea how that actually functions. This is one route. This is described by one number, but this is an absolute mess. And you might look at this and think that this was designed by my rabbit with a really short attention span. And if he were designing a route, it would look like this. But that's not how routes like this happen. These happen through a slow process of historical accretion. You start with a route, and then there's a request for service here, a request here, a request here. And if you have a transit board and an agency leadership who basically says to a transit planner, we want you to serve that need, that new shopping center, that hospital, whatever, we want you to serve that need, but we want you to change as little as possible, these are the kind of routes you come up with. You do a series of changes. Individually, every one of those changes looks like it makes sense. They add up to something that definitely doesn't make sense. This is Shepherd in today's system, and I'm showing you every bus route that combines to serve Shepherd. So we've got one set of routes here. Notice that these are loop routes. So the even numbered route, the odd numbered route are the clockwise and the counterclockwise versions of this. And then here, a different bus takes over, and it takes you to here. And then here, a different bus takes over, but then leaves the street, and there's no service at all here, and there's another bus route here. Just making a trip from one part of Shepherd to another, and we'll hold questions till the end. Just making a trip from another part of Shepherd to another is a real undertaking. Here's another fun one. This is the Route 60 at its southern end. And once again, the result of a series of extensions leading to a really fun fact. If you are waiting for the bus right here, that's an 8-minute walk and a 20-minute bus ride. Wow. So at the exact moment that the bus shows up at the stop, you would actually be faster to just start walking than to get on that bus at that stop. Once again, a series of extensions. This one service, and at the end you end up with a system that really doesn't make much sense. And that's also very difficult to understand. You're seeing some more one-way loops over here. Another favorite example, this is the 11 Nance, my favorite bus name in Houston. This is, in the 1920s, the Nance streetcar route. I have highlighted in yellow the extent of the street we know as Nance. And if you look at this route, this is a streetcar line that should be called the Nance streetcar. It serves the entire length of the street and it connects it into downtown. It's incredibly logical. Over time, stuff happens. First of all, the city starts growing outwards, so this gets extended. Then new community centers are built, new high schools, and all of those are reasons to sort of add to the route, add little deviations to serve things. And then at some point in the 50s, 60s, TxDOT comes in and builds I-10, and when they build I-10, they actually chop Nance into two pieces. The section of Nance that you might know, Last Concert Cafe, etc., and a very brief section here. So what does this route look like today? Here's today's Nance bus.
Oh, wow.
It is on Nance for 3 blocks. And on that section of Nance no one has ever heard of, but it is still called the Nance since this is a direct descendant of that streetcar route. That name is not helping anyone navigate the system. We also have very few frequent routes. If you think of a bus system like this, you're actually thinking of it wrong. All routes are not the same thing. How often a bus comes is incredibly important. Frequency is the key to transit. Jarrett Walker, my favorite way he has of illustrating this is imagine you have a driveway with a gate at the end that opens every 30 minutes. Say you want to get somewhere faster. What do? Do you buy a sports car, or do you get that gate to open more often? It's all about frequency. And if you look at the system in terms of frequency, you will see our routes are all over the place. This is number 85 and number 36 on Washington Avenue. Notice morning peak, very frequent service. Very quickly drops off by midday. We're getting service every hour or so. Picks up again in the evening, but notice even this isn't entirely regular. There's a big gap and then two buses right after each other. And then in the evening, another bus number takes over the route. So this is not the kind of thing where you can just show up and know a bus is going to be there. This is something where you have to plan your life around the transit and not vice versa. This is what our current system looks like. So roughly 15 minutes means that a bus, you don't have to think about a schedule to ride that bus. So if we've got a frequency of 15 minutes or better, that's frequent service. That means you can just show up and you know a bus will be coming along. This is our current system, and the red is what we have in terms of frequent service. Notice how many blues we have out there. Notice how many greens we have out there. Most of our routes are infrequent, and that is a really big inconvenience to our passengers. You look at the weekend, it gets a lot worse. So here's weekday, here's Saturday. Notice how many of those frequent routes dropped away. And watch places like this. We are seeing entire neighborhoods drop off the map. And now I'm going to go to Sunday, and this is pretty depressing. Why does this matter? Well, first of all, if I'm going to depend on transit for my life, that isn't just about getting to work. I also have to get to the grocery store. I have to get to school. I have to do all the other things I need to do in my day. And if I need to get to the grocery store on a Sunday morning and my bus route isn't there, or if it's infrequent, that's a very big deal as a transit rider. But secondly, if I'm shopping at the grocery store, that means somebody has a job at the grocery store on Sunday morning. There's an awful lot of jobs that aren't 9 to 5, and our system is based around 9 to 5 jobs. Weekend service is about serving all of those other jobs and all of those other trips, and we're not doing it very well at all. I've heard the word transit desert. That to me is the definition of a transit desert. When we have entire neighborhoods where we lose service, or where there's only a bus an hour snaking through the neighborhood. And the frequent service is very much radial. Our entire system is radial. It's based on getting people to downtown. And the reality is most of our riders aren't going downtown. So downtown has turned into a gigantic, inconvenient transit center. What all of this has meant is that we have seen a significant ridership decline. There's our local bus ridership. And now you may look at that and say that's because Metro cut service. But look at that line. That's how much service we've provided. We are providing more service and carrying fewer people, which is just about the definition of doing something wrong. And we can find that same statistics and other things. This is the Downtown Houston Commute Survey. Downtown workers and how many of them use transit. For the people who live outside Beltway 8, in the range of the park and rides, we have 50% of downtown workers choosing to use transit. For the people inside 610, it's somewhere around 20%. What this is saying is when we provide good transit service, Houstonians will ride it, but obviously we're doing something wrong in here. Also, this region is growing. This region is changing. We're in an employment center right now that didn't exist in the 1920s. There are jobs all over the region. There are people all over the region, and we don't serve it very well. Here is population density. And what's notable about Houston is our densest populated areas are outside the 610 loop on the west side. And look at the footprint of our frequent system and how badly it's serving those areas. The southwest and the west side has a huge amount of demand, and we're not serving. And you would say very similar thing for jobs. Here's our major employment centers. And look at the transit use. Downtown TMC are well connected to the transit system, get over 30% of those employees using transit. Look at those others, 5%, 7%, 2%. Greenway Plaza ought to have a much higher share than that. And this is a sign that we're not providing good service connecting to here. We also have a huge opportunity here. New rail lines means we can make the bus system better. We can use rail as that higher speed, higher capacity, higher frequency, highly reliable service into downtown. If you look at our map, every bus route that's shaded on this map is a bus route that connects to one of the rail lines outside of downtown in the TMC. So notice how much of an opportunity there is to rethink that system. We don't have to run a bunch of buses parallel to a rail line. It gives us the opportunity to really set up crosstown service that connects to that rail line, but connects to a lot of other places besides. And so it's all about how can we really leverage bus and rail together as a system. And then finally, we're going to keep growing. So what we want is a plan that actually sets up a system that we can build on for decades to come. So we did all of this, as David said, by literally taking a blank sheet look at the bus system. We said to the consultants, don't just tweak our routes, just start over. Tell us with what we know about where people live and where they work and where they're trying to get on transit, what the best system would be to serve them. We think that system meets all of these goals. Much simpler, more frequent service, 7 days a week. Ridership increase of 20% in the near term, 2 years. A much better match with where people live and work. Much better connections between bus and rail. And a very clear foundation to move forward. So let's talk about that. First of all, as I said before, we tend to sort of classify things like this. We tend to think there's parking ride, there's local, and there's rail. Part of this thinking is that local bus actually consists of a couple of different kinds of service. There is frequent local service, which, like I said, is that show up and go. It's there all the time whenever you needed service. Then there's sort of the supporting routes, which are the 30-minute frequency kind of stuff. Maybe hour frequency, which are really feeders into that system and support to that system. And then finally, where we need it in low-density neighborhoods with really spread out destinations, there's alternate kinds of service, and we're suggesting flex routes. I won't go into detail on that today. There's a whole nother presentation on flex routes here. But really tailoring service to different transit needs in different corridors. So here is the existing network. Red routes are frequent, every 15 minutes or better. The blue routes are 16 to 30, and the green routes are more than 30. Here is today's system. Here is what we are proposing. Look at that improvement in terms of the number of frequent routes. Look at how much better that serves all of the growth we have seen on the west side. Think about all of that density down here. Think about all of these jobs up here and how much better it's serving those places. But at the same time, look at the east side of town. Look at the 3rd Ward in U of H. And notice how much better service is getting there. Across the board, you are seeing improvements. And the other thing, and it's harder to see, but if you start to look at it, you can notice a distinct simplification in this network. Look at this part of town, for example, and notice how much simpler that network looks. I'll talk about the grid and how important that is as a part of this. This is midday frequency. If you look at the peak, this is peak frequency. So you can see at the peak, we can ramp that even more, and look at these West Side job centers and how much benefit you see there from that peak service. So what does this do? I'll go through each of these. Like I said, we're looking at a conservative 20% increase in ridership as a result. So first of all, more frequent routes to more places. Those frequent routes are truly a different kind of service than the less frequent routes. It's that zone within which you can travel when you want to and get where you want to. So what does that look like today? On our system today, these are the frequent routes. And so what I'm showing here is what's within walking distance of those routes. This is our frequent service zone. If you live within this zone, you can access all of the destinations in this zone without having to look at a bus schedule. That's not a bad zone. There's, downtown TMC. We've got sort of uptown hanging out here. There's, There's definitely a lot of places within that. So that's today's network. What we are proposing is a dramatic increase in that frequent network. Adding a lot more neighborhoods, adding a lot more centers to that. And it's all about a grid. The great advantage of a grid is it does not privilege one place over another. When you are on a grid, any 2 points on that grid, you can find a direct route that connects them. So the nice thing about a grid is we're not saying downtown is more important than any other place, but we're also not saying that Greenway is more important than any other place. We're putting them all on a grid, so regardless where you want to go within that zone, it connects. So here's our local example. We are sitting here right now, and under this plan there will be a frequent bus down Richmond Avenue. That bus hits Greenway Plaza, it hits Uptown, it hits West Chase. If you go the other direction, it hits Neartown, it hits Midtown, it hits the 3rd Ward, TSU and U of A, and it ends up at the East End. So just that one frequent bus is already connecting you to a lot of places. But a network is about the power of connection. So now let me show you every route on the frequent network that connects to that bus route. Every place you can go with one connection. And notice now we have added essentially all of the major job centers within the urban core, as well as all the way out to Greens Point, West Chase, Memorial City, to that network. That's a lot of places you can get to very easily. That's what the grid is about. And as you trace out those trips, you'll notice, if I'm here, I want to get to Memorial City. It's a nice, simple L-shaped trip. Wherever I'm going, you'll see that the route does not take me out of the way to get there. So there's that zone today. There's what that zone looks like on a Sunday. Here's what that zone looks like under Reimagining. Because what we are saying here is those frequent routes aren't just frequent on a weekday, they're frequent all day, 7 days a week. So if you need to get to the grocery store on Sunday, that service is there for you. Jay Crossley and I, a long time ago, were talking about how do we define Houston, and the inside the loop and outside the loop designation is wrong, because it doesn't actually reflect what the density is. And we drew something we call the blob, which basically extended from downtown westwards all the way out pretty much to State Highway 6 in some areas. And that's really what this is. What's within this zone is 1 million people and 1 million jobs within that area. So let's compare to other cities. Let's look at some of our peers here. Here is Dallas. On a weekday at midday, their entire light rail system is not part of frequent service. If you want to get out to Plano, there's only a train every 20 minutes. And Sunday is pathetic. Here's Atlanta. You'll see something very similar. This is their, notice it's rail lines and a couple of bus routes, all radial, all centered on downtown, and how much that drops off on a Sunday. Here's Minneapolis. Their network is much stronger, but once again, you go to a Sunday, that really falls off. Salt Lake City, apparently people don't want to get anywhere in Salt Lake City on a Sunday. The light rail line isn't even running at 9 a.m. on a Sunday. Denver, all of those bus routes, look at that on Sunday. Portland, we all think Portland is this great transit city, but that's pathetic. Notice how this is only rail, and it's only 10% of the rail system that makes that frequent service on a Sunday morning. This is us. Now, compare the size of that to everything else you've seen, and you're seeing that this will be one of the biggest frequent transit networks in the country. That's really cool. It's really cool to be up here and talking about our transit being better than Portland's. I mean, we know we're better than Dallas, that's obvious. Another big part of this is making everything simpler and easier to understand. Simple, straight routes, better maps, tools, route numbering, route names. I mean, the idea that there's a route called the Shepherd that runs the entire length of Shepherd. You know, going from that to that. I mean, how much easier is it to navigate a system that has that kind of logic? And that includes making a lot of connections a lot directer. We are on Richmond right now. We're out here, and there is a Richmond bus. That Richmond bus runs to Main Street, pulls into Wheeler Station, and stops. So, say I want to get from over here, say the Houston Tomorrow offices, and say I want to get across town to TSU. I will note that Richmond and Wheeler are the same street. Here's what that route looks like. This is our current system. It takes you an hour to get from there to there. And notice that that's 3 bus routes to make a trip that stays on the same street. I don't really understand why I need to go to South McGregor in order to make it over there. What do we do under the reimagined system? We do the logical thing. The number 7 bus just keeps going. It crosses Main Street. It keeps going to the 3rd Ward. It hits TSU, it hits U of H, and ends at Eastwood Transit Center, where it connects to a bunch of other bus routes. What does this do? It makes crosstown trips a lot easier. And I think that's a very big deal for communities like the 3rd Ward. There's an awful lot of jobs out on the west side. And this makes those jobs accessible to people who live over here and are dependent on transit. And on the flip side, if you're engulfed, this is educational opportunity. This means you can get to U of H and get your college degree. If you look at the outer ends of the system, you see very similar kinds of improvements. This is the northwest corner. Notice how all these bus routes just kind of fizzle out in the middle of nowhere? So when I get from here to here, what does that involve? I mean, you can see sort of the lack of connectivity here. Here's a reimagined system. We're pulling everything up into West Little York Park and Ride up there and making those connections at the outer end. Notice how everything is crossing, everything is meeting, and the park and ride connection's a really nice thing too. This now means a bus from up here to Memorial City. I bet there will be people who will do that, who will park there in order to get to Memorial City. I mean, it's not in an HOV lane, but it does mean you don't have to worry about the traffic and you can sit there and get some work done or get some reading done. So, in terms of frequent access, mentioned this already. We're trying to get people where they want to go. We are doubling the number of people within half mile of the frequent network and increasing the number of jobs within half a mile of the frequent network by 55%. This is about opportunity. This is about jobs. This is about education. This is about people having affordable places to live where they can get somewhere on transit. And let's talk about weekend service. Current Saturday, current Sunday, reimagined weekend service. What we are saying is every bus route will run the same on Sunday as it does at midday on a Monday. Not a single bus route goes away on the weekend, and all of the frequent routes are frequent. So what does that mean for our riders? Currently on a weekday, 49% of our current riders are getting on the bus at a location with frequent service, 25% on a weekend. This takes that up to 3/4 of our current riders are currently boarding at the stop that has frequent service. Right now, 5% of our riders are boarding at stops that have no service on Sunday. And look at what that does. And notice even the 30-minute, the number of people who get 30-minute service on the weekends is dramatically expanded, and even on the weekdays expanded. On top of that, huge positive impacts for current riders. 93% of riders will find a bus at the exact same bus stop they get on at today. And out of the remaining 7%, 6.5% are within quarter mile of a new bus stop. The remainder, nearly all of them, are less than half a mile. For example, not within this quarter figure, the Alabama bus goes away under this. Alabama is within walking distance of Richmond and Westheimer for its entire length. But some of that is just barely over a quarter mile. So that's where you're seeing some of those numbers. And notice, like I said, 99,000 more current boardings on all these services. Let's talk about speed, because travel time does really matter. So the team looked at this network, looked at 30 different spots across this network, and ran a matrix of what are those travel times. That's a lot of work. And so the question is, what did that do to travel times? These are those 30 centers, and as you look through them, this is the average improvement in travel time for trips from each of those centers to the other 29 locations. Notice Northside and FM 1960, 30 minutes average travel time improvement. As you go through this, look at all of those numbers. If you look at all of our trips of those pairs, 28% of them get 20 minutes or more faster, 58% get 10 minutes or more faster. This will get people where they're going a lot more quickly. So how does that happen? Part of that is simply frequency, especially on connections. If you have to wait less for the bus, your trip's definitely faster. But some other things we're doing. Taking fewer buses through downtown. Downtown is one of the slower places to operate a bus. It is not a very efficient transit center. So by not feeding all of these buses through downtown, we get a huge improvement. What else do we do? We get rid of some of these deviations. Apparently this one exists because at some point the street was closed for a utility repair and it never got routed back. There's a handful of people in this neighborhood who get on this bus, but for every person who gets on, there's, 20 people on the bus who are getting detoured out of their way. You look all over the system and you see these. You ever see a bus that says 50 Harrisburg via Detroit? That means this bus will make a beeline for Hobby Airport until it's about 2 miles away, and then it'll just get distracted and wander off through a neighborhood before heading back to Hobby again. We are doing a lot of these things where we're really slowing down trips with these kind of deviations. We're also moving connection locations so they actually make sense. If you live in the Heights and you want to go out to Memorial City, our current system says travel east into downtown and then travel back west to get to Memorial City. The new system says just catch the bus to the Northwest Transit Center and transfer there. That, in this trip, saves 39 minutes by putting that connection spot in the right place. And you see all over this system these amazing connection spots. This is Northwest Transit Center, and every bus route that goes into Northwest Transit Center, look how far flung that is. Look at how many places are connected. Eastwood Transit Center on the east side. So these connection points that really connect people where they want to go very effectively. And we're also looking at reliability. High frequency routes are huge for reliability. You're making connection from one bus to another. I was on this exact bus on Lyons. I'm going over to the Houston Food Bank. The Houston Food Bank is served by an hourly bus. Our bus got stuck behind train number 1, and that puts us 5 minutes late. And I'm looking at my connection time, I'm going to miss this. And then we just barely missed being stopped by train number 2 railroad crossings later. If we had been stopped by that, I would have missed my bus. I would have sat at the transit center for 50 minutes. I was going to a meeting, but if I've been going to work and that happens a couple times, I don't have a job anymore. If I am connecting to a frequent bus and it runs every 15 minutes, worst case is 15 minutes delay, no matter what happens on the trip over. That's a huge deal. But it's also a lot of details. 30% decrease in the number of times buses have to cross freight rail tracks. It's a huge benefit in terms of reliability, and fewer of the extremely long and unreliable routes. And then, if you look at this system, it's very easy to expand. You can extend the grid on the outside. You can dial up the frequency of routes. You can add in routes and gaps in the grid. And there's also a potential for real express service in here. For example, between downtown and Northwest Transit Center, we're showing 2 routes, both frequent. The local via Washington Avenue and the express via the freeway. That express route means significant travel time savings for people who are not going to a destination on Washington Avenue. But if you're going on Washington Avenue, you have the choice of the local. There's potential to put a lot more of those express routes in here. So as we get more funds, especially under the referendum, which moves funds from roads to buses, we'll be able to do things like that. So I've talked about the timeline, hoping to implement in 2015. Let me talk about some of the other things that are important to this. One is branding. This is what Portland does at a stop with frequent service. Notice the frequent service flag. Notice the bus route says frequent. Notice there's a map of what their frequent routes are. Unfortunately, they have budget cuts, so they're not all frequent anymore. But anyway, they do have a map of them. So even what you're seeing in this study is a start of that. I fully intend, and I think the team fully intends, that Metro will have this kind of map to help you navigate the system. Not just a regular bus map, but a series of maps that are really tailored to understand the system and find the service that serves you best. I also look at our bus stops. This is not a very useful bus stop.
No.
I used to ride the number 9 Gulfton. There's a stop on both sides of the street, and on one side of the street it says 9 Gulfton, on the other side of the street it says 9 Gulfton. One of those goes downtown, one of those goes to Gulfton. How do you figure that out? We are going to have to redo every bus stop sign in town, so we might as well make them more useful. So does it look something like this? This is just, like I said, one board member out of 9. I'm just throwing an idea out there. But wouldn't it be nice if that told you where that bus is going and that it's westbound? And maybe even give you the name of the stop. If you're giving somebody directions, that might make things a lot easier. And there's a connection at the stop to another route, so why don't we note that on the sign and tell you where to catch that bus?
That'd be awesome.
This is not, as capital projects go, this is not a particularly big capital project, but I think it could do a lot of good for a rider. And Metro, for ages, has had the policy that we have a corporate identity and everything needs to look the same. I don't really feel a park and ride bus and a frequent local bus and an infrequent local bus are the same thing, and Metro is. Why shouldn't we start to designate? Why don't we say that all of our frequent buses will be served by buses that actually say right on the side, this is frequent service? Really make people aware of what's out there. So there's all sorts of potentials there. This here is an amazing document. The first blog post I ever wrote on intermodality, long before I was a board member, was about how our park and ride network really needs a map that's more like a rail map and less like a bus map. Park and ride riders don't care how many curves there are in the freeway between the park and ride lot and their final destination. They care about connectivity. This, from the consulting team, is the first official map of the park and ride network that actually treats it that way. And really, I think maps like this can change how people think of the system. But there's other pieces to this, because fundamentally, transit riders aren't riding from stop to stop. They're riding from destination to destination. This is a really nice bus stop. It's got a nice shelter, it's got a bench, it's got a concrete pad. Is this a really nice place to get on the bus? And look at that poor pedestrian right there. San Antonio, we're making fun of another city here, but you can find plenty of places in Houston like that. So here's one of those places. This is, when I worked for Matrix Structural Engineers, we officed in Greenway Plaza, and I took the number 9 bus to get there. So what did I do every morning? Rode the bus, got out here. I am now on the wrong side of the street, and there are 5 lanes of speeding, high-speed traffic between me and the other side of the street. So me and the kids that were going to the junior high school would just look for a gap in traffic and make a dash for it. There is no crosswalk there. There is no light there. It's not safe, frankly. Then we get to here. We've got a street, that's good, it leads where I'm trying to go, but it has no sidewalk. So I'm walking in the street to here, across to here, into the building. Now, the junior high school students who are trying to get here, they have it a little worse. They go to here, there's another street here, they don't connect, so they climb through a gap in the hedge and walk past the loading dock of the Home Depot, and that will get them to their school. So the kind of pedestrian infrastructure we have really matters. This is a sidewalk that's going to get fixed, but there you see a really nice, wonderful light rail line, and you see the basic infrastructure we have for connecting to it. And this is not something Metro can solve by itself. This is something where we need the city, we need the county, we need developers, we need everyone helping to really get people to those transit stops. And luckily, I am seeing that happening now. Here you see a project to actually rebuild sidewalks leading to light rail stations on the north side. This is not a Metro project. And what's wonderful about it is notice you rebuilt the sidewalk and not the street. I think that's notable that we as a region are starting to get this right. Now here's another problem, and I'm going to pick on HCC for a little bit. This is HCC's West Loop campus. It is on a freeway frontage road. A frontage road is one way. Bus service by its nature is two-way. So what happens when a major institution that's a major destination is on the frontage road? If I'm riding the bus this way, it's great. Bus stop, walk to the front door, I'm in good shape. If I'm riding the other way, I can't get off here since there's no way to cross the freeway. So that's the path in the other direction. If we have a destination like this, there's nothing we can do to get good bus service here because the street network literally will not allow it. And even if you look at the Reimagine map, it's full of these kind of things. This is a loop we're doing to serve an HCC campus that is very inconveniently located. This is a narrow ditch street that really, by any standard, shouldn't have bus service on it, but it was the only way to figure out how to get in here. Now, I pick on HCC because I actually see HCC increasingly doing this right. This is a really good place to put a college campus. Put it next to a transit center and it's really easy to get there. But I'm still seeing a lot of health clinics, I'm still seeing a lot of things being put in places where they're incredibly difficult to serve with transit. So as a region, we need to do a lot better. And I would say, for all the planners sitting here, this is something that planners can play a huge role in. You know, anybody involved in a college expansion project, talk about how are we getting transit riders to these new educational buildings that we're building. So that is the plan. We are holding public meetings across the region. You'll see the schedule on the Metro website. We are also going out to wherever we are asked. We've spoken to a bunch of neighborhood groups, so if you have a group you want us to speak to, let us know and we will get out there and we will spread the message. And we've even been meeting our riders at transit centers, really trying everything we can to get as much good input as we can. Our website is incredibly detailed with this information, and it also gives you a chance to provide feedback. We really want your comments on this plan. And for right now,